Thank you for coming back to another episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents. This show will highlight the life of James Madison, who was not only our fourth president, but he was also our shortest president as well. So sit back, maybe grab some of Madison's guilty pleasure. Yeah, that's apple pie with ice cream, and enjoy the show. James Madison was born at Belle Grove Plantation on March 16, 1751. At the time, Belle Grove was the home of his maternal grandparents. The original house where Madison was born no longer stands. The current Belle Grove house was built in 1790. 15 days after he was born, James Madison was baptized by the Reverend William Davis. A short time after his baptism, the infant Madison returned with his mother Nellie to a small wooden home on the grounds of the plantation that came to be known as Montpelier. Little is known about Madison's childhood, except he developed a prejudice against Native Americans as his family lived in fear of Indian attacks near their home. After receiving much of his early education from an instructor named Donald Robertson, whom Madison idolized, James enrolled at the College of New Jersey in 1769. While at Princeton, Madison learned Latin, Greek, theology, and the works of the Enlightenment before he graduated in 1771. Following his graduation, Madison stayed an extra year to study Hebrew and political philosophy under the college's president, John Witherspoon. This is Madison at Princeton, 1771. Following a brief stint in local politics and then serving under his father in the militia, Madison was elected as a delegate to the 5th Virginia Convention in Williamsburg. From May 6 to July 5, 1776, the delegates met at the Capitol building and adopted three resolutions which helped secure Virginia's alliance with the independence movement in Philadelphia. On May 15, 1776, Madison noted that Williamsburg residents marked the occasion by taking down the Union Jack from over the colonial capital and running up a Continental Union flag. Then on June 7th, Richard Henry Lee left Williamsburg and arrived at the Pennsylvania State House, where he delivered the message agreed upon at the 5th Virginia Convention. Lee stood up in Congress and carried out the instructions the convention commanded him to use. These colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. James Madison was elected to the Second Continental Congress in 1780 and became the youngest delegate at only 29 years of age. He served for 3 years. Madison returned to Congress in 1787, where he played a huge role in shaping, debating for, and adopting the United States Constitution. James had used his Virginia plan, something he had been working on at his home, as a blueprint for the new Constitution. Madison, along with fellow Virginians Edmund Randolph and George Mason, presented their idea for a new form of government to Congress. On September 17, 1787, James Madison approached the table in the background and penned his signature onto the greatest vision of human freedom in history, the United States Constitution. The signing of the United States Constitution, September 17th, 1787. Let me show you the original United States Constitution, which was signed by James Madison on the fourth page. On September 17th, 1787, James Madison dipped his quill pen into this historic inkstone and signed the United States Constitution. The U.S. Constitution outlined the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial, but something was missing. Madison realized the new Constitution lacked rights for the people. A couple of years after the Congress of the Confederation had dissolved, Madison began his quest for the Bill of Rights, even though he initially didn't think the Constitution needed modification or additions. On March 4, 1789, James Madison became a member of the United States House of Representatives. He had defeated James Monroe in a heated campaign to represent their district of Virginia. Madison played a huge role in helping the new president, George Washington. He helped write Washington's inaugural address, and George leaned on Madison for his understanding of the Constitution. Shortly after taking a seat in Congress, James Madison proposed the Bill of Rights, which was passed by the House and Senate on September 25, 1789. Those rights would be the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. The bill was finally ratified by the states on December 15, 1791, a year after the capital had moved from New York City to Philadelphia. Historians have said there might have been a federal constitution without Madison, but certainly no Bill of Rights. And for this, James Madison became known as the father of the Constitution. A tavern at Chimney Point, located in Vermont on the eastern shore of Lake Champlain, was built around 1785 on the grounds of a 1731 French fort that once occupied this site. Six years after the tavern was built, Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and Congressman James Madison stayed at the tavern on May 31, 1791, during their tour of upstate New York and New England. Jefferson and Madison were accompanied on their trip by slaves James Hemings and Matthew. During their stay, Madison wrote, "On Crown Point is one family only. On the opposite side, the country is well inhabited." Just 6 months after James Madison stayed in this tavern with Jefferson, the Bill of Rights was ratified on December 15, 1791. Dolly Payne Todd, a 26-year-old widow, married James Madison, who was 43, on September 15, 1794, in Charlestown, Virginia. Throughout President Jefferson's two terms in office, from 1801 to 1809, his friend James Madison served as Secretary of State. When Jefferson decided to not run for a third term as president in 1808, he threw his support behind Madison. After defeating Charles Cotesworth Pinckney 122 to 47 in the 1808 presidential election, James Madison arrived at the United States Capitol where the inaugural ceremony was held in the House of Representatives chamber. On March 4, 1809, James Madison stood in the House of Representatives chamber and recited the presidential oath of office. Not only did Madison wear a 100% American-made wool suit during the ceremony, but outgoing President Thomas Jefferson sat alongside him as well. During Madison's inaugural address, the new president said he wanted to beef up and fund a strong military and militia, while at the same time defend the republic and the rights of the people. Throughout Madison's first term in the president's house, the growing escalation between Britain and France intensified, especially when America's trade ships were being attacked. Hostilities with Native American tribes continued to escalate as well in the Northwest Territory, which included the Battle of Tippecanoe on November 7, 1811. Tragedy struck the Madison administration on April 20, 1812, when Vice President George Clinton died from a heart attack at the age of 72. Clinton was the first vice president to die in office. 6 weeks later, on June 1, 1812, President Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war against Great Britain, stating the United States could no longer tolerate Britain's state of war against the United States. First Lady Dolly Madison. President Madison sought re-election in 1812 and defeated his opponent, DeWitt Clinton of New York, 128 to 89 in electoral votes. On March 4, 1813, President Madison recited the oath of office in the House of Representatives chamber as the War of 1812 with Great Britain intensified. Madison's new vice president, Elbridge Gerry, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, was also in attendance. The War of 1812 hit home on August 24, 1814, when British forces invaded Washington and burned the Capitol building, the President's house, and other government buildings. Moments before British troops arrived in the nation's capital, the President and First Lady, along with other members of the government, fled Washington. They ended up in Brookville, Maryland, 2 days later. The burning of Washington. During the burning of Washington, as the British approached the president's house, Dolly Madison asked Paul Jennings, her personal slave, to save the Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington, known as the Lansdowne portrait. With the help of a French cook and the gardener, Jennings helped remove the portrait from the wall and safely took it out of the mansion. When it returned to the president's house, it was the only surviving item in the mansion prior to the War of 1812. Saving the Washington portrait. After vacating Washington just prior to the British attack on August 24, 1814, President Madison fled to Virginia and then into Maryland, where he stayed for roughly 2 weeks. On September 8, 1814, James and Dolly Madison began their stay at the Octagon House, which was built in 1799 and located just a short distance from the burned and gutted President's house. Also known as the Colonel John Taylor III House, the building actually has only 6 sides and not 8, technically making it the Hexagon House. The President and First Lady made the Octagon House their executive mansion from September 8, 1814 until March of 1815. For their 6 month stay, the Madisons paid John Taylor $500. The Octagon House is reputed to be haunted by Dolly Madison or John Taylor's two daughters who died in the home. Let's go through the door behind me and visit the mansion where President Madison and his wife Dolly lived for 6 months. I'm standing on the dining room table in the Octagon House. I wondered if James Madison was ever served his favorite meal in this room: Virginia ham, buttery rolls, apple pie, and cider. A gambler allegedly had died in this room, and his spirit had been reputed to haunt the room. Anyone for a game of cards? While most of the furnishings in the house were period pieces or authentic replicas, the floorboards on the first floor were original to the historic mansion. Both of Colonel John Taylor's daughters were killed on these steps, and their ghosts allegedly still haunt the stairway. One daughter died before the War of 1812, and the second daughter died sometime in 1817. I'm standing on the fireplace mantel in the master bedroom, which was located on the second level of the home. But during their 6 month stay in this home, tragedy once again struck the Madison administration. On November 23rd, 1814, Vice President Elbridge Gerry died from a heart attack at the age of 70. President James Madison signed the Treaty of Ghent to end the War of 1812 in this second floor room, which was down the hall from the master bedroom. This table I'm standing on was an identical replica to the original table, which was in the parlor on the first floor. This is the original table where James Madison signed the Treaty of Ghent on February 17th, 1815. Usually, I sneak onto a historic table or piece of furniture, but the college student on duty allowed me to stand on this artifact during my visit on May 17th, 2019. The Treaty of Ghent was kept in this protective box when it was delivered to the Octagon House for President Madison to sign. Following its first service on October 27th, 1816, President Madison came to worship at St. John's Episcopal Church, where he selected pew 28 for his private use. Since then, every president has at least been an occasional attendee, giving it the nickname Church of the Presidents. St. John's is located along Lafayette Square, just a block or so north of the White House. Although the President and First Lady never returned to live in the gutted President's house, James Madison ordered the reconstruction of the mansion to begin immediately. When the Madisons left the Octagon House after the war, they resided in the seven buildings until the end of the President's term in 1817. Two states were admitted to the Union during Madison's two terms as president, which brought the total to 19. Louisiana became a state in 1812, and Indiana was admitted in 1816. Built around 1764 and located near Orange, Virginia, Montpelier was the boyhood home and then adult home of James Madison. The fourth president lived at the mansion on and off from 1764 until his death in 1836. James Madison was just 13 years old when his father, James Sr., moved his family to this plantation house. When James Madison returned to Montpelier following his presidency, he was financially poorer than he was before being elected. Although he was one of the largest landowners in Orange County, a succession of poor tobacco and wheat harvests produced little income. Madison also felt obligated to cover the gambling debts of his ne'er-do-well stepson, who had mismanaged the plantation during James and Dolly's absence. Let's walk through the door to my left and visit the world of James and Dolly Madison. Upon stepping into the drawing room, the first portraits I saw featured Washington, Adams, Monroe, and Jefferson. Not only were they men Madison had admired, they were friends of his as well. I had to laugh when I saw the portraits that hung on the opposite side of the room. The paintings of James and Dolly Madison looked great, but I was surprised to see an image of Mary Magdalene situated alongside a portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Was that James Madison's humor on display, or a way to separate Jefferson from Dolly, whom he admired? During my time in the drawing room, I envisioned Madison as he played chess with his good friend Thomas Jefferson. I'm standing on the original dining room table at Montpelier. Prominent dinner guests over the years at Montpelier included Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, and Marquis de Lafayette. Madison's old library was one of his favorite rooms and was added onto the house while he was president. Some of these books were originally owned by James Madison. Madison loved books and maps, and those were abundant in the old library. In the spring and summer of 1786, Madison worked on his Virginia plan in the new library. Those papers of self-governing were the blueprint for the United States Constitution. It was also in this new library where the papers of James Madison were organized, including his notes from the Constitutional Convention. The new library also offered a magnificent view of the western Blue Ridge Mountains in the distance. I'm standing in the Madison's master bedroom on the second floor of Montpelier. When James's health declined, he moved to a first floor bedroom. This remained Dolly's bedroom until she left Montpelier for good in 1837, shortly after her beloved husband's death. When James Madison's health declined to the point where he no longer could go upstairs, he used this downstairs room as his personal bedchamber. After being offered breakfast by his favorite niece, Nellie Willis, the president found that he couldn't swallow. When Nellie asked, "What is the matter, Uncle James?" the president replied, "Nothing more than a change of mind, my dear." Those were the president's last words. Moments later, James Madison died in this bed on June 28, 1836, at the age of 85. The day following his death, the casket containing the body of James Madison was brought to the Madison family cemetery on the grounds of Montpelier. A private Episcopal service was conducted at graveside before numerous relatives, friends, neighbors, and some 100 slaves. I was thrilled to stand on the tombstone of the father of the Constitution, President James Madison. The smaller obelisk located behind me was the grave of Dolly Madison, who died at her home in Washington, D.C. on July 12, 1849, at the age of 81. When I was placed onto a stable ledge on Madison's obelisk during my visit on May 11, 2019, it was the 34th presidential gravesite I had visited. I found this statue, which honored both James and Dolly Madison, outside of the visitor center at Montpelier. PJ and I hope you've enjoyed our show dedicated to the life of James Madison. Did you enjoy the pie? Please do us a favor and subscribe to our channel and hit the like button below. And please feel free to leave a comment. The next episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents will focus on the life of James Monroe. Thank you for watching and see you soon.